2 moderate southern hemi swells, our forecast. I am Mark Sponsler, and welcome to the Stormsurf Video Surf Forecast for the week starting Sunday, June 9th.
Stormsurf, waves, weather, buoys, altimetry, snow, temperatures, El Nino, weather analysis, essential data for outdoor people, all the time, no hype.
Be sure and like and subscribe. Ring the bell. Get automatic notifications when the videos are posted, typically on Sunday evenings. To subscribe, just click the Stormsurf icon down in the lower right-hand corner of the screen. If you enjoyed the video, give us a thumbs up. Click that icon down below. And if you'd like to make a contribution to the cause, you can. Just click the special thanks or the super thanks button down below, the heart with the $sign in it. With that, I'd like to thank the folks that donated last week. Pre-Plan, Emilio, thank you very much. PPM, all the way from Chile, thank you also. And then our 2 longtime contributors, Hindcast and Evolution Moto, thank you guys both, really appreciate it. And then a new contributor, KMJ Berto, big donation too, thank you so much. With that, let's get to work. We'll start by looking at significant wave heights for the South Pacific Ocean. Here's New Zealand here, Australia over here. We see remnants of a gale, still with 26-foot seas aimed well to the northeast. This actually was a stronger system a couple days ago and has produced what is the third in a series of swell. The first swell is pretty much faded out in California now. The second one bound in here about midweek, and then a third one from this one beyond that. Also targeting Hawaii as well. We'll get into all the details in a second. There's also a gale here off the Ross Ice Shelf producing 29-foot seas. All this energy is aimed well off to the east. Maybe some swell, sideband swell will make it up into California, but I'm not holding my breath on that. So for now, I'm going to kind of ignore it. All right. But before we get into all that, let's take a look at current conditions. We're going to start in Northern California. We're looking at the Point Reyes buoy off of Point Reyes, California. That's just north of San Francisco, buoy 029. We're looking at all the energy that's hitting this buoy, all the way up from 33.3 second period. That's really super energetic swell. 1/10 of a foot. You see a bit of energy here in the 25 second period range. Not very much though, not even rideable. All that's buried in this swell here. You see like 13-12 second period. This is swell from a gale that was generated off the coast. We'll get into that in a minute. This is a couple of days ago. Then there's piles of wind swell all mixed in. All right, so there was a question, what's the difference between ground swell, significant wave heights, wind swell, that sort of thing? This is a great example of that. All right. Significant wave height is the sum of all energy in the water, be it super long period swell down to wind swell, or even just chop, like unrideable, just warble in the water. All right, this is a good example. So here is wind swell, period in the 7-second period range. And literally, I would call that wind swell. Whereas what I call ground swell for California is pretty much anything with, we'll say, about a 12.5 second period or longer. So this energy right here would qualify that. And this is a distinct swell unto itself. Okay. And then even this energy out here in the 25 second period range, definitely ground swell. So in fact, you could see it here. Let's see if we can do this. The significant wave height, 10.9 feet at 11.8 seconds. So what does that really mean? It's really geared for boaters. Okay. If you're out in a boat and you're away from shore in deep water, the combination of the ground swell, the wind swell, the secondary ground swell, and actually significant wave height goes the whole way down to 1 second period swell. All that theoretically could override each other and create a singular wave at 10.9 feet. Now, from a surfing perspective, for the most part, that's meaningless, okay? You can't ride a 6-second period swell while also riding a 12-second period swell, while also riding a 25-second period swell. I guess maybe theoretically it could all, glom together, but for the most part, you ride the ground swell. That is the longer period swell. And if you're on the east coast of Florida, I typically say ground swell is, 10 seconds or higher. Now, officially, I think ground swell, another term here is when the swell energy actually starts reaching down to the bottom of the ocean and hits the quote-unquote ground. Okay, the longer the period, the further deep down into the ocean the swell reaches. Like 20-second period, I'm just doing this off the top of my head, I think it goes down about 1,700 feet, whereas a 13-second period swell maybe only goes down 800 to 1,000 feet, and wind swell at 7 seconds only goes down, maybe, 50 to 100 feet. I'm sort of making that up. I have it all the math laid out. But the general thought is the shorter the period, the less mass of energy is actually moving in the water, and so it doesn't touch or reach down to start hitting the ocean's bottom until it's much shallower. When a swell, be it wind swell or ground swell, hits or starts scraping on the bottom of the ocean, then it starts, I think they call it shoaling, when it actually starts helping the swell itself lift up above the ocean surface. Okay, and the longer the period, the more a swell jacks up, and then when it eventually breaks, it tends to break a lot harder than a 5-second period or 6-second period wind swell, because there's just not that much energy and momentum behind it. All right, so for the moment, so what this does here, we have a bunch of software that goes and tries to pick out the individual swells. All right, so let's see what we have. Primary swell, 4.9 feet at 12.4 seconds from 282 degrees. That would make surf at 6.1 feet. I just got out of the water, and that's about what it is. So that does pretty well here. Now, again, how do you determine the primary swell, at least here in Stormsurf world? Well, what we do is we parse through every one of the swells and use the integration of the swell height and its period to calculate a wave face height, like 6.1 feet. And you see, actually, the wind swell is bigger on this chart, but the swell height from this ground swell is bigger than the integration of the wave height here and that shorter period. In fact, you can see it here. Secondary swell, 8.3 feet at 6.5 seconds from 318 degrees, only makes surf, this is theoretically, it's pure math here, 5.4 feet. So the primary swell is this ground swell at 12 seconds. The secondary swell is this wind swell at 6.5 seconds. And then the significant wave height, again, is the summation of all this junk all mangled together. And then we do one other thing here, chop height. That is energy from 2 to 5 seconds. It's not even, this chart cuts off at 5 seconds because you really can't surf anything less than 5-second period swell. But we put it in here and calculate it just like it was a swell to give you a sense of how destroyed or how clean the surf is, how much lump and warble there is in the water. Chop height, 3.7 feet. And let me tell you, it was ugly. It was not pretty. You could hardly, the chop was piling on top of the wind swell, piling on top of the ground swell, and it was just a warbled mess. Yes, there were waves. It was the last real north swell of the season. We'll show you the charts in a minute. But for purposes of illustration, this number clearly said when you have something over 3 feet here, it's garbage. You go out only if you're desperate, right? 1 to 2 feet is probably the preferred option, and of course, anything less than 1 foot in the chop height is really that is the best. All right, let's move on. Let's go down to Southern California. Point Loma South Buoy, number 191. This is off of San Diego. Now we see a much different picture here. None of the ground swell from the North Pacific, none of the wind swell. We see just a bump of energy here in the 15-second period range. Primary swell, 2.7 feet from 14.9 seconds from 215 degrees. This is this persistent southern hemi swell from a gale the first gale off of New Zealand. It's been a while now. The swell doesn't stop. Surf height, 4.0 feet. Okay. And then secondary swell, 1.4 feet at 11.3 seconds. You can see it here. That is actually from 231 degrees. That's a mixture of the wind swell and the northwest ground swell, trying to sort of weasel in through the Channel Islands, but not making any rideable surf. And then the chop height, just for fun, 0.9 feet. That's exactly what you want to see. A much cleaner canvas for waves to break on. And then finally, we go to the south shore of Lanai. This is good for Oahu as well and all the other Hawaiian Islands. This is the most protected of the buoys, so you don't get any wind swell wrapping around. It just focuses pretty much pure southern hemi swell. Buoy number 239. And we see here, well, there's a nice little bump of energy in the 16 to 18 second period range. Okay, and then you also see energy going the whole way down to 5 seconds. Some of that's wind swell, but some of this is also southern hemi swell. This is the second southern hemi swell of the series. There's 3 swells all en route or in the water, if you will. This is bound for California, typically about 2 days after what hits in Hawaii. So it's something to look forward to as we get into the coming work week. Primary swell, 1.9 feet at 16.3 seconds from 205 degrees. That's pretty much the track right up from New Zealand. Surf height, 3.2 feet. And then secondary swell, 1.8 feet at 13.3 seconds from 194 degrees. This is the first of the series of swells fading out. Surf height, 2.4 feet. So we have the first swell fading here, the second swell in the series building here, and a third one on the charts behind that. But before we go and inspect down south, we're going to look in the North Pacific. I mean, here it is. Today's the 9th of June. A gale. Still, this is the fuel from El Nino still having an impact in the atmosphere. We're not going to go dive into all the Jetstream charts and everything, but suffice it to say, on the 6th of June, that was on Thursday, Jetstream was pretty strong out here, diving south, forming a trough, and a gale developed with 19-foot seas, actually 20-foot seas. These are the highest seas over the entire domain captured in this image. You can look at the exact coordinates. Max winds, 47 knots. 47 knots, nearly storm force, at least for a couple of hours, in June off of California. As we got into late Thursday night, well, we had, about 24-foot seas, building to 27.7-foot seas. This is Friday, 2 days ago, about 5 in the morning. San Francisco right there. This is a swell that's hitting, but you also notice there's seas. What is this? This is 8, 9, 10-foot seas right along Cape Mendocino here. And that's what's making all the junk and warble and, it's very short period garbage. So ground swell with garbage still makes garbage. All right. Anyway, as we got into later on Friday, the gale continued with 25-foot seas. You can look at it and see, and it sort of spun out. Another little secondary gale developed there with 20-foot seas. All that comes to swell hitting, working its way down into it. Just started hitting solidly, probably about 10 o'clock this morning in Northern California. This is eventually going to start wrapping its way around Point Conception, but probably not doing anything meaningful for Southern California. And after that, the North Pacific is to go flat. So then we turn our focus to the southern hemi. New Zealand there, Ross Ice Shelf here, Antarctic ice, Antarctica down here, Australia here. We're going way back. Friday, May 24th. So what is that? 2+ weeks ago? Gale developed pushing under New Zealand here with 28-foot seas. And that thing didn't do a whole lot. I mean, it made swell. This is the first in the series of swells. And then it reorganized on Monday, producing a small area of 32-foot seas. This is what has been producing steady swell hitting for days now, it seems like. That one is finally starting to fade out. Then we go, and there was a bit of a down period. And then we got into, here we go, we're looking right here. So we got into Sunday, so this would be a week ago. A gale developed while pushing under New Zealand with 30-foot seas, building to 32-foot seas, and then 31-foot seas, fading on Monday. This is a swell that is just starting to hit the south shore of the Hawaiian Islands now, probably bound into California, we'll say Wednesday, so probably later Wednesday, okay? And then after that, we'll go on, we're into June 5th, here's the dates, June 6th here, and then one more gale formed right there on Friday, just 2 days ago, June 7th, lifting well northeast, not huge in terms of seas, but with a good-sized fetch area and all aimed almost due north. There we go, what are we, 30-foot seas, probably 1 pixel in there somewhere, peaking out on Saturday, yesterday, June 8th, with 33-foot seas, and now it says 35 feet here, but you got to read the coordinates. That's the disc scale here that probably isn't going to do a whole lot for us. This is the one to watch. And then it started fading. As of today, it's pretty much gone. So that is the third swell on its way. And we'll say, okay, maybe some background sideband swell from this fourth system, but I'm not holding my breath on that. So one swell in the water for California. The second one starting to hit Hawaii. The third pushing north, of course, bound for Tahiti first, and then up to Hawaii, and then over towards the U.S. West Coast. But let's look beyond that. We're going to start by looking at Jetstream level winds. These winds are up at 30,000 feet. They help support the formation of gales. When those gales form, help direct their track. We're looking for a trough. Now, we're in the southern hemisphere, so a trough would be like that, a push to the north. That helps create an eddy, a clockwise eddy in the upper atmosphere, and if it's strong enough, it manifests itself down at the ocean surface. That is the hallmark of low pressure, and as we all know, low pressure, if it's strong enough, generates winds. Those winds get traction on the ocean surface, impart energy to the ocean, creating raw seas. As those seas propagate away from the fetch area, the shorter period elements of the swell fade off. The longer period elements become exposed, and that creates swell. And then swell, as it moves into your beach, creates surf. Notice, swell. I didn't say wind swell. I didn't say wind chop. It takes real swell, ground swell, really swell with a period from the southern hemisphere, and it's typically 5,000 to 6,000 miles up into California and 5,000 miles to Hawaii. You really need at least a 15-second period swell to make all the journey and not decay too much. Anyway, this trough here, you see it as we get into late Sunday and Monday. It starts fading. There isn't very strong winds pushing up in its western flank, aimed to the north. And also notice the jet is starting to split, with the influential southern portion of the jet pretty much raking over the Ross Ice Shelf, not doing anything. And this becomes the theme for quite a while. I mean, when you get this split pattern here, and like here, typically get high pressure in between the two jets, and high pressure doesn't do anything for us in terms of swell production. If anything, look at this. Instead of a trough, we have a ridge, the jet pushing hard south into Antarctica proper, doing nothing for us. We're into Thursday. We're almost a week out. Really, no signs of any hope until we get to Friday. It almost looks, well, the ice line, I think it's about 65 south, so a trough trying to build, but not really escaping. There we go. It finally gets north of the Ross Ice Shelf, but notice winds dropping off, so probably not a whole lot from that. But look at this. We're going, just take it out, 180 hours. Look at this. You get the sense the jet wants to start pushing to the northeast again, potentially forming a trough. This is really typical of the summer after a El Nino winter up in the northern hemisphere. The New Zealand corridor especially seems to really wake up and is productive in terms of swells. During La Nina years, the focus tends to be like over here in the southeast Pacific, but in the year after El Nino years, it's all in the southwest Pacific, and this year that's pretty much all we've had is just a steady diet of consistent, not large, but, modest size southwest New Zealand swells. Then we go take a look down at the ocean surface level pressure, surface level winds. Here's the remnants of the gale that has produced the third swell. Winds now 30 knots. Just look at the colors here, 30 to 35 knots right there, fading out. Here's the other gale, just barely exposed off the Ross Ice Shelf with 40-knot west winds, and pushing off to the east as we get into Monday and doing nothing. Now, we know the Jetstream split, so we would expect to not see any meaningful gales, and I'm really not seeing anything. Well, then you do get this thing. This is interesting. On Thursday, a gale, it's really a storm, 50-knot winds forecast, or this would be, Thursday evening, the 13th. But notice the gale itself is kind of falling southeast. There is fetch here aimed to the north. There you get a little northward push on Friday. I mean, that's still 5 days out. This is something to watch for. Maybe we could get some swell from this, and that would be great if, in fact, it did happen, because there's really not a whole lot else forecast. 35-knot winds, great, but you really need 40 to 45-knot minimum. I prefer 50-knot. That way you'll get like a good solid 17-second period swell. But it looks like maybe about a week out, and this has been the pattern. We get a series of swells from under New Zealand, then things sort of fall apart for a week, and then it wakes up again and starts gaining momentum, and that's what it looks like for the moment. So here we go. Significant wave height. Again, this is the and significant wave height is the highest 1/3 of all the waves out here in the open ocean, okay? A little bit different than near shore, but it's a good approximation for what you might experience. Now, I say that, but significant wave height is the highest of 1/3 waves. So it's sort of an approximation of the worst case scenario you get if you're out in a boat somewhere. Here's our gale, and it says 29-foot seas, significant wave height at 29 feet. That said, it is not unusual for having individual rogue waves once an hour being twice the significant wave height. So maybe, and again, it's swell and conflicting seas all mashing together for 3 seconds and creating one peak at, nearly 60 feet. But again, all that gets very evened out as this raw swell energy starts propagating further out, and those big rogue waves pretty much dissipate. All right, so let's move on. Yeah, here's our gale, still 30-foot seas, 31-foot seas. Nope, so peak seas, theoretically, Friday night, the 14th of June. We'll see. It's something to keep our eyes on. Also notice there's something over here in the Tasman Sea with 29-foot seas. If you're heading to Fiji, that might be something to keep an eye on. The position here to the north is good. It is free and clear. But again, this is a model. I don't really believe a model more than about 4 days out. So it's something to just keep your eyes on. And it's closer to Fiji than if it was down in here, meaning less swell decay. So again, if you're into traveling and you're into that, there's a possibility. There we are, a week out, and things start settling down. Local wind forecast. All right, so here is high pressure. Here's California here. Hawaii's down here. High pressure pushing into the coast, creating a gradient, 20 to 25 knot northwest winds. That's what's generating all the short period junk and warble. Yeah, if we didn't have southern hemi swell, it would be great. You could go surf wind swell at select protected breaks. But when you have southern hemi swell, you don't really, at least up in Northern California, you don't want a bunch of wind swell in the mix because it just trashes everything up. So that's been sort of the problem this entire summer so far from Northern California. Southern California, not so much. I mean, the Channel Islands, Point Conception tends to really protect breaks in Southern California from the wind swell, which is a good thing. So we get into Monday. Here we go. The gradient fires up again. 20 to 25 knot northwest winds the whole way from Point Conception up to the North California border. Trades light for the Hawaiian Islands. So we get into Tuesday. The gradient backs off, still making wind swell, but mainly the most of the wind is from, we'll say, the Golden Gate northward. So that's better for Central California. Trades light for the Hawaiian Islands. Wednesday, gradient pulses again, building lots of wind swell. Even though local winds are relatively light for Central California, there's going to be a bunch of wind swell in the mix. Light trades for the Hawaiian Islands. We'll just go and see how. Thursday, pretty much the same deal. Friday, pretty much the same deal. That's a little low here off the Pacific Northwest. Another one out here in the Gulf of Alaska. Saturday, the gradient builds more the whole way to Point Conception and even over the Channel Islands, so that's probably wind swell even for Southern California. Trades light for the Hawaiian Islands. And then Sunday, this looks horrendously bad. Unless you like riding wind swell, but it's just 30-knot nuking northwest winds for pretty much everywhere north of Point Conception. Light trades for the Hawaiian Islands. So let's put this all together. Okay, the problem is, because of the size and the consistency of the wind swell, it pretty much is going to bury any southern hemi swell. And we're not trying to track multiple swells here. This is really a chart for the primary swell. All right, surf heights, you can see 6 feet. That's what it is, and that's a mixture of the wind swell and the actual northwest swell that's hitting. And then in 3 feet into Tuesday, Wednesday, 5 feet. All this is just wind swell, especially when you get these drops out. It's all 6, 7 foot. It's all wind swell. Look at the wind speeds, 27 knots, 24 knots. You get the idea. We'll get down here and try to pull apart, see if there's literally 5 feet at 11 seconds if you get into Monday, Tuesday, 3.5 feet at 9 seconds. Then we go back up in Wednesday, 5 feet at 10 seconds. It's all wind swell. Here's a little bit of the southern hemi swell buried underneath. This actually should arrive like Wednesday afternoon. 1.7 feet at 14 seconds and then fading from there. But you get the general idea. Find the most protected spot possible if you want to surf the southern hemi swell. Then we go to Southern California. This looks a little bit, it doesn't look huge, but at least it doesn't look like a bunch of trashed out wind swell. Surf heights 2 to 2.5 feet. Fading down to about 2 feet, back up to 2.7 feet as we get into, Saturday, and wind speeds relatively light. Let's go look at the pure swell here. Here we go. 1.7 feet at 14 to 15 seconds. There's multiple pulses from that first New Zealand swell overlapping. Then we get into Wednesday. Let's see. Here's the secondary swell. It actually hits late Wednesday, but doesn't really poke through and overwhelm the first swell until Thursday. And what do we have? 1.5 feet at 15 seconds, dropping to 14 seconds. And then wind swell takes over after that, and the third swell doesn't even show up till after Sunday. And then we go to the south shore of Oahu. Surf 4.8 feet now. That is the newly arriving southern hemi swell, slowly fading down as we get into Wednesday, into Thursday. And then the third swell in the series arrives with surf heights building to the 5-foot range. Let's go take a look at swell heights. 3 feet at 15.7 seconds, late Sunday night, Monday dropping from about 2.5 feet at 14.5 seconds, fading down from there. Then the next pulse, here it comes. You can see the swell height building up to 3.5 feet in period, 14.5 seconds, somewhere in there seems like probably somewhere in here. So we'll say Friday, Saturday. Well, we can even go up here. Yep, Friday, Saturday. Peak, the integration again of swell height and swell period. Not always the longest period makes the biggest swell because, the swell size is higher. And so wherever the sweet spot is here, and you kind of get a sense for it after a while, where you get close to the biggest part of the swell with still the longer period, and then that's when you get your biggest waves. All right, let's go take a look long term. What's going on with the two major weather oscillations that affect the atmosphere's ability to produce surf? That is the MJO, the Madden-Julian Oscillation, and of course the El Nino Southern Oscillation. And so, we'll start discussing the MJO, the Madden-Julian Oscillation. It has two sides of this oscillation, the active phase and the inactive phase. The active phase is the good phase. It's like a low pressure system. The inactive phase, high pressure, not so good. The MJO, the two phases of the MJO rotate on opposite sides of the planet from each other, moving from west to east over the equator. Active phase on one side of the planet, inactive phase on the other. The active phase, why we're most interested in that, because it is a low pressure system. In it being a low pressure system, it will then take warm, moist air that's down at the ocean surface, lifted aloft up into the atmosphere, that energy then, one, it condenses as it hits cold air aloft, but it also gets sucked into the jet stream. A stronger jet stream will not split, it will consolidate, and a stronger jet stream builds stronger troughs, which then build stronger storms, which make bigger surf. So the active phase is our friend. The inactive phase does the exact opposite. It's a high pressure system. It does not allow warm, moist air to move up. It steals energy, effectively stealing energy from the jet stream, and the jet stream splits, and you just get a bunch of high pressure and wind and no real swell production. All right, so we're going to start. This is data from the TAO buoy arrays, series of buoys strung across the equator. This is the East Pacific here, West Pacific here. That is the equator right there. These buoys also have wind sensors on them. Okay, the active phase of the MJO, because it's a low pressure system, it dampens trade winds. Trades are made by high pressure. If you have weaker high pressure, the trades get slack. If you have stronger high pressure, the trades, at least on the fringes of the high pressure system, get stronger. So we're just looking at the arrows here. We see the longer the arrow, the stronger the wind. So pretty strong trades here in the East Pacific, pretty strong trades in the Central Pacific, and weaker trades over the West Pacific. But it's not the actual wind speed that matters. It's the anomaly, the difference from normal for this time of year. So they have a long-running record of wind speeds. You know, yeah, they die in the morning. They come up in the afternoon. But if you go and you average this all out day after day, year after year, you get sort of a generalized sense of, well, what's the average wind speed in the morning for the East Pacific and in the afternoon? And then so you have a model and you can play the two against each other and get a difference. So trades, just look at the little arrow here, weakly stronger out of the east than normal in the East Pacific, pretty much the same in the Central Pacific. Whoa, we have some westerly anomalies. Again, the active phase of the MJO is like a low pressure system. It dampens trade winds. That's what this suggests, that maybe, just maybe, some sort of active MJO is starting to play out in the West Pacific. Let's go see the forecast. All right, so here is the forecast from the GFS model for winds over the entire planet from 5 north to 5 south in the equator. That's the area we're interested in. And we're only interested in the Pacific, and this is zonal wind anomalies. So are the winds stronger than normal or weaker than normal? The trades specifically. The blues are easterly anomalies. So consider that enhanced trades. The reds, decreased or weaker than normal trades. Consider this the active phase of the MJO. Now that all looks interesting, but this is the whole planet, so the date line is right there. International date line kind of, in the Central Pacific. Far West Pacific starts at 125 east, so over here, okay? And the main area where this MJO thing interacts and does magic or does damage to the jet stream is, I call it the Kelvin wave generation area, from 125 east to about 170 west, so right in here. So here we go. When this goes back in time, so the area we're interested in, you just do a slice right up the middle of this chart right there. So you can see back in May, we had westerly anomalies. Then as we got to the end of the May, and this might have been the active phase of the MJO, and then we had this big blob of blue easterly anomalies. So the inactive phase of the MJO, starting the beginning of June, we see westerly anomalies. But here we are today, and right after today, you see blues showing up again. This model's been all over the place. 2 days ago, it showed nothing but blues through the next 2 weeks. But then it also shows here, well, maybe westerly anomalies working their way to the date line. So this would be the active phase of the MJO. So here is active. This clearly is inactive. This maybe not active, just other forms of tropical variability. Inactive, likely, with maybe a weak active phase as we get deeper into June. Now, that doesn't mean that just because you don't have the active phase, the jet stream isn't going to do something. But what it does mean is that the odds are less likely that you're going to get significant storm development. That said, we've had 3 storms. They've all been happening from, I think it started in May 24th. So the MJO is not a complete determiner of what the Jetstream does and what storms do, so don't despair. Let's move on. So we normally go look at outgoing long-wave radiation, cloud cover. Again, if the active phase of the MJO is low-pressure system and it's pumping warm, moist air aloft, you get cloud cover. But the model, as you can see if you watch this video regularly, this is all corrupt. This is the statistic model, the dynamic model. Okay, well, we do have a frame or two of something that suggests inactive phase. The oranges here are lots of sunlight reflecting off the ocean surface, meaning no clouds, meaning high pressure, meaning inactive phase of the MJO. So this says inactive phase 2 weeks out. The last model we looked at, also from the GFS model, said, well, maybe we're going to have westerly anomalies. It showed maybe an active phase, so kind of this is all garbage, basically. It's hard to tell. It suggests a very weak MJO signal, and the model is having a hard time sorting it out. The phase diagrams here, all right, so these are corrupt as well, but you still can kind of see, we'll go into this real quick. The MJO moves from west to east, from the Indian Ocean to the Maritime Continent, over the West Pacific to the East Pacific, under the United States, across the Atlantic, and then over Africa back to the Indian Ocean. You can see May 15, 16, 17, and June 7th is here. I think that's it. This is the last day that we had a good beat on where the active phase of the MJO was. It was in the West Pacific. If the dot here is inside this circle, it is exceedingly weak. And see, that's the statistic model. It's saying very weak MJO in the West Pacific. The dynamic model is trying to get a handle on things, and it's suggesting a weak active phase somewhere in the far East Pacific, probably, and again, inside the circle, so very weak. So the CFS model is not corrupt, and that's a good thing. And so we see its output here. Again, this is the east-west component of the wind over the entire planet. Dateline runs right up the middle, so that's roughly the central Pacific. And the far west Pacific, 125 east. Same deal here. The blues are easterly anomalies, inactive phase. The reds, westerly anomalies, the active phase. And we actually have the MJO highlighted here, the black line. So here was an active phase back in March with lots of westerly anomalies, followed by a weak inactive phase with easterly anomalies, yet another weak inactive phase, late April, easterly anomalies. Here was our last decent active phase back in, we'll say May, somewhere into about mid-May, and then easterly anomalies. Here's where we currently are, weak westerly anomalies, and it shows the active phase over the Indian Ocean and sort of trying to get through here, but I think this is what the model's really telling us is the MJO is so weak, you can't really even tell where it is. And then you look at the model, and it suggests pretty much, a little bit of easterly anomalies here for a week, and then pretty much neutral anomalies. A very weak pattern. I don't think the MJO is really going to have any influence one way or other over the Jetstream, which is actually a good thing because the remnants of El Nino, though they're not showing up here in any significant way, are still, I think, affecting the Jetstream. And again, that pattern, that southwest swell under New Zealand, the consistent pattern, all just screams the typical year after El Nino sort of pattern going on. The MJO, it looks like from this chart, is having literally no effect. But let's beat it to death just one more time. This is the CFS model, but this goes out 3 months. So, I think we have a pretty good sense that the MJO isn't playing much of a part of anything, at least for the next month. Let's go look out further. Now, this chart, again, same deal. East-west component of the wind. The blues are easterly anomalies. The yellows, westerly anomalies. But the past performance is down on the bottom of the chart. The forecast is here, and you see a clear pattern. Again, the date line runs right up the middle. The far west Pacific starts at 125 west. That's our area of interest. So here is what's been happening. Active phase, westerly anomalies there, here's our current westerly anomalies. You get the sense. But we see the model's been consistently forecast this building easterly anomaly pattern starting west of the Kelvin wave generation area, but little bit at a time, sort of building to the west. At the end of the model run, that is roughly filling almost the entire North Pacific with easterly anomalies. With westerly anomalies, our current set of westerly anomalies, whatever we have, retrograding further and further to the west and really becoming established. This is the maritime continent and over the Indian Ocean. This is a classic, the development of La Nina, the end of El Nino and the development of El Nino. Let's overlay the MJO just for, oh, here you go. This says it really well. The MJO, I mean, this is, the active phases are these solid contours here, and the inactive phases are these very, very weak MJO pattern. No big surprise. The MJO tends to be strong in like the October, November, December time frame, even into January, and very weak in the summer months. So that's what we're seeing. Then we'll overlay the low pass filter here. Now this is the El Nino, La Nina indicator. Solid contours, a low pressure bias. The dotted contours, a high pressure bias. This was our El Nino with 1, 2, 3. We actually had up to 4 contours, smack dab over the date line, right what you'd expect of El Nino. And then it died as we got into May. Here comes the high pressure bias building. This is La Nina building as we get into somewhere in mid-July time frame. The high pressure bias is going to pretty much take over the Pacific. That, again, if high pressure is stronger, it produces stronger trades, and this likely means the trade wind machine will start firing up. And the low pressure bias, which was in the Pacific, is already starting to build over the maritime continent. It is only going to get worse. So this is your typical high pressure in the Pacific, low pressure in the Indian Ocean. That's La Nina, where El Nino was low pressure in the Pacific, and it doesn't show it here, but high pressure over the maritime continent. All right, so let's go take a look down into the ocean. The TAO buoy array, again, those buoys strung across the equator used for monitoring El Nino. This chart, this is the ocean surface here. This is down 400, 500 meters down in the ocean. These are the anchor lines on the buoys. You can see these little X's here. Those are the sensors strung down the anchor lines. It's temperature gauges. And you can see the balance of warm and cool water across the Pacific. During El Nino, warm water builds in the East Pacific. This is the East. During La Nina, warm water builds in the West Pacific. You can clearly see the pattern. This is centigrade temperatures, 30-degree isotherm right here. I think it's about where it was 2 weeks ago when we did the last video. 29-degree isotherm hasn't changed a whole lot. The 28-degree isotherm right here at 150. Actually, a couple days ago, there was a little sign of something trying to go here. But that's gone. It's retreated. 24-degree isotherm. I think at one point it was actually hitting the surface right around 120 or maybe even 125. It's trying to build back a little bit, but the indication here is clearly warm water is in the west and not in the east. But it's not so much the absolute temperatures. It is the anomalies, the difference from normal for this time of year. And you can see this plain as day. Water temperatures much cooler than normal in under the East Pacific and also boiling up to the surface here. The emergence of La Nina, this is all driven by enhanced trades blowing from east to west that create upwelling, drawing up cold water from deep in the oceans and you end up with a cold slick off of Ecuador. All right, let's keep going. Here is another version of that same chart, but this also incorporates satellite data, but the short of it is it's telling the same picture. Cold water in the east, warm water building into the west, the emergence of La Nina. Here is the satellite data. This is showing you the height of the ocean, the anomalous height of the ocean. That is, you strip out waves, wind waves, tide, and is the surface, the sphere of the ocean higher or lower than normal? Why does that matter? Well, if you have cold water at depth, cold water contracts. The column of water above that contracting cold water will create a dip, a negative anomaly, a dip in the ocean surface. Likewise, if you have warm water at depth, it expands, it displaces the water above it up some, and you get a positive bump. All right, so here's the chart. What are we looking at? Well, here's Chile, Peru, Ecuador, that is the Galapagos there, the equator, dateline there, Central America up there. These are not temperatures. These are the height of the sphere of the ocean, or the deviation from normal in the sphere of the ocean in centimeters. Minus 15 centimeters, minus 10 centimeters, and Ecuador's here. This goes out to, well, Hawaii's up there, so we're almost out to a point south of Hawaii. So all this is saying lots of negative sea height anomalies, which infers that there is lots of cold water down deep in the ocean, which the previous charts, because we actually have temperature sensors digging down into this area, suggest, yes, that is in fact the case, the emergence of La Nina. And then another chart that sort of puts all that sort of into motion shows the movement of warm and cold anomalies across the Pacific. This is time over here and is the West Pacific. This is the East Pacific. You can see back in June of 2023, a year ago, we had lots of warm water building up. The beginning of our El Nino hype and warm water buildup. And then that continued with Kelvin waves, balls of warm water traversing the Pacific, driven by a strong active phases of the MJO. The MJO peaked out, or the active phases did as much as they could do in terms of driving warm water to the east into November and December, maybe even into January, but there was just no more warm water left to tap, and so you end up with an upwelling pattern over in the West Pacific. That is now traversing the Pacific and moving into the East Pacific, also driven by anomalous trades at the ocean surface while warm water starts building in the West Pacific. So from El Nino to La Nina. All right, let's go down to the ocean surface, not down in the ocean, at the ocean surface, because it is those temperatures on the ocean surface that really make the difference. If temperatures are warmer than normal, they support evaporation, they take moisture, lift it up into the atmosphere, and that makes clouds and rain, feeds the jet stream, and does all kinds of stuff. But if you have colder than normal water at the ocean surface, well, that does not support evaporation, and then you don't get clouds, you get cloud-free skies, and that feeds high-pressure development. All right, so here's what's currently going on. This is sea surface temperature anomalies. The reds and oranges, warmer than normal temps. The blues, colder than normal temps. Chile, Peru, Ecuador, Central America, Buoy out here, but the equator is roughly here. Okay, and these are 4 pictures that are not perfectly stitched together, but you get the idea. Oh, and the Galapagos, like there. Cold water running in a stream from Ecuador the whole way out to a point south of almost Hawaii. Okay, and it's amazing. There's just this little band of cold water here, 5 degrees north and south of the equator. That dictates what the jet stream does, what high pressure and low pressures do over the entire planet, and it's all in this little area here in the Pacific. But clearly we see the emergence of cold water on the surface. Now this warm water north and south of it, you go, that's pretty impressive. And it is impressive, but this is lingering warm water from last year's El Nino that theoretically should start fading as this cold water starts building in coverage. Sea surface temperature trend for the past 7 days. Okay, South America, Central America. You can see temperatures, well, there's a little bit of rebound of warming, but there's also equal amounts of cooling. What you really notice, though, is see this big cool patch off of Africa. These 2 areas off of Ecuador and Africa here tend to mirror each other, and this clearly suggests there's some sort of a easterly wind, trade wind pattern that's pretty strong in the Atlantic, and also at times trying to get or build traction here in the Pacific. Pretty much the classic La Nina pattern. Now you see, oh, lots of warm water up here. Yeah, but that doesn't really do anything. It's warmer than normal water for this time of year, but all that really means is there's probably high pressure here. High pressure in the center of high, there's no wind at all, and that allows the sun to really warm the surface temperatures. That said, there's still, temperatures are not really even normal in this area. I mean, this seems a little bit overhyped right in this area. Anyway, something to look at. And then the backed off view here. Again, the emergence of La Nina, the developing cool pool, the fading remnants of El Nino. But you also notice there is a lot of warmer temperatures all across the planet, and this is updated. You know, they try to recalibrate what is normal But the planet is warming, and the ocean is warming in response to that. Also notice the massive amount of warming in this area, all up into the Gulf of Mexico, that area. This is a evaporation machine supporting massive evaporation, and then you get tropical waves pushing off of Africa. They tap this massive amounts of up-moving air, and that is fuel for hurricane development. We'll be watching that as we get deeper into the hurricane season in the Atlantic. Now, for the Pacific, you're not going to see much over here. Maybe over in the West Pacific, but not a whole lot in the East Pacific. CDAS Nino 1.2 index. This is the area right there along Ecuador and the Galapagos Islands. Temperature trend plus 1 degrees. That was back in March, but you just see water temperatures steadily falling, hovering now somewhere around the 1 degree range. Today's absolute value, 669 thousandths of a degree. So we're up a little bit for the past 2 days, but in general, temperatures hovering around 1 degree. Now, this is not the official El Nino region. This is the Nino 3.4 region. Today's value plus 4 thousandths of a degree. So basically dead neutral. We've been hovering right at neutral since mid-May, and the expectation is we're going to be going down from here. Notice the trend line from warm temperatures towards colder temperatures. Let's go look at the official data. These are the weekly sea surface temperature anomalies for multiple areas. Nino 1.2, this is the area, again, right there by the Galapagos in Ecuador, minus 1.1 degrees, and you can see the trend has been steadily downward. Well, we were up at 2.6 in October, 2.83 in August. This is what was driving all the El Nino, the significant El Nino hype, and now it's faded. We're moving towards La Nina. And then this is the official El Nino monitoring region, the Nino 3.4. Today's value, 0.1 degree. Actually, that's last week's, May 29th. So I think the update comes on either Monday or Tuesday, and this will probably be hovering somewhere around 1, or if not, just 0. So for sure, El Nino is gone. La Nina is getting established, but per this record, it is not yet really present in the equatorial Pacific, but we'll have to see where all this is going. What does the atmosphere think is going on? We looked at the MJO thing, and it's kind of asleep, and it's not helping the Jetstream a whole lot. We looked at sea surface and subsurface temperatures, and they all sort of tell us La Nina is happening. But but it doesn't mean anything unless the atmosphere is affected by it. So we look at the difference in pressure between Darwin, Australia, and Tahiti. Tahiti in the Pacific, Darwin roughly the Indian Ocean. When pressure is lower in Tahiti, the index goes negative, and that would be synonymous with either the active phase of the MJO or El Nino. Minus 20.74, whoa, minus 26.92. We're on a pretty good little run here of negative numbers, at least for the past 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 days. Yeah, maybe the active phase of the MJO. Okay, that's good. The 30-day average. Okay, so this takes some of the noise out of the mad swings of the MJO or other forms of tropical variability. It's right now -2, basically neutral. We were hovering at, well, we were up to +3, but that's still neutral. You can just look here for the past month. Basically, we're just sort of blopping around right at neutral. The 90-day average, -2.49. And where has this been? Pretty much unchanged for the past month. So right at neutral. So all this, let's go look at a graph. Here's the 30-day moving SOI graphed out. And you get some time here. Dead neutral is right at 0. Here's where we are. Okay, maybe a little negative. But you just sort of average it out in your mind's eye, and we've been hovering at neutral pretty much since January. The downward swings are the active phase of the MJO. The upward swings are the inactive phase of the MJO. Now here you see back in January 2022, we were all in positive territory. That's La Nina territory. And then starting January of 2023, when we got all those big rainstorms in California and everything, that was the MJO. driving hard, pushing the pressure down over Tahiti, low pressure building in the Pacific, the development of El Nino. We were down at like minus 20 in, was that April, May, June. And then all of a sudden, boom, the bottom went out and everything went neutral. And then it tried to recover as we got into September and October, but it just couldn't get it together. And basically our El Nino fell apart on us. We are at dead neutral right now. Again, looking at all the sea surface temperature charts, we are in a transition phase. The remnants of El Nino fading out, the beginnings of El Nino trying to get established, a battle between the two. But you look at the subsurface temperature data, it's clear La Nina is coming. There is no fuel left in the West Pacific water-wise to fuel the development of El Nino. So we're going to collapse and the pendulum is going to swing back to La Nina. Here is the sea surface temperature forecast for the official El Nino monitoring region, the Nino 3.4. This is from the CFS model. So where are we? We are in June, which is roughly here on the chart. This shows temperatures, what's that? 0.15 to maybe 0.2 degrees above normal. But as we get into latter part of June, temperatures should be neutral. As we get into July, temperatures forecast to get slightly negative. I mean, we're talking a tenth or maybe 0.15 of a degree below normal. Ultimately, temperatures falling as we get into the fall region to 1.3 degrees, maybe 1.35 degrees below normal. That would be La Nina starts at half degree below normal to 1. This would be a weak El Nino. Moderate El Nino goes down to 1.5 degrees. So this says moderate El Nino. Now there's another version of this, PDF corrected. It says temperatures only going to 1 degree. So that would be right on the threshold of a weak trying to move into a moderate El Nino. So some degree of, we'll call it a weak La Nina, developing. We looked, I think it was last time we did the forecast 2 weeks ago, the consensus model, all those models showed temperatures somewhere between 0.75 degree to 1 degree below normal. This is consistent with that. So it looks like, and we're moving out of the spring unpredictability barrier. So it looks like we're heading towards, at least as of right now, it's still a little bit early in the period to know for sure, but a moderate La Nina. So for right now, small southern hemi swell in the water, but also relative to California, certainly north of Point Conception, a bunch of wind swell and some northwest swell, the last swell of the massive El Nino winter season. I'm joking, of course, but it's June and we had northwest swell, and that clearly is a La Nina sort of indicator. I mean, an El Nino indicator. That said, the North Pacific is, I can't imagine there's going to be any other swell produced after this. So that's the end of that. Southern Hemi swell, 3 swells, we said it before, are on their way to the north. The first one fading out, the second in the series just starting to hit Hawaii, bound into California maybe in the Wednesday time frame. And then the third in the series coming to Hawaii by next weekend, and then for California 2 days after that. And then a bit of a break after that. So a pretty good, steady, nothing huge surf-wise, no massive surf. If anything, maybe Hawaii will do a little bit better. This last, the third storm in the series was pretty shadowed by Tahiti relative to California. So, that's something to consider. That said, it will be interesting to see how much size shows up in Tahiti. The expectation is 15-foot surf. Hawaiian, and that should be later Monday into Tuesday. So I'm sure check your social media and all that. You'll get reports and see what's happening down there. That'll give us some early indicator what's bound for Hawaii and the U.S. West Coast. After that, a bit of a break in the surf, and then maybe the Jetstream suggests a return pattern a week out, so you get a week to go take care of business, and then maybe we'll be back into the swell production machine. Looking long term, though, La Nina for sure setting up. No hope for El Nino returning, at least for a couple of years. So put that into your plans and plan accordingly. All right, that's the video for this week. If you enjoyed it, give us a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed, subscribe. Click the Stormsurf icon down in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. And if you'd like to make a contribution, hit the super thanks button down below, the heart with the $sign in it. We do appreciate your contributions. And with that, we're done for this week. We will do it again next week. Same time, same channel. Thanks for watching.